So for this tutorial, you'll be needing your basic bodice, both the front and the back piece for it, and a sheet of paper to draft out your cape. So once you've got that, the next thing you have to consider is the placement of your basic bodice onto your plain sheet of paper. There are a number of things to consider while placing your pattern, and then you must have seen some pattern piece before that has something like a separation at the shoulder part. They usually do this to create seam allowances for the cape, since they usually slash off the shoulder part, but since I still have mine there, I don't need to create the spacing. So another thing to consider is the back bodice, the zip allowance area. If you want to create pleat for your back flare, you can leave it on like this, or even create more. Otherwise, you're going to be taking it outside the grain line like so, because I'm not going to be putting pleats on mine, so I'm taking it outside the grain line like so. So I'm just going to go ahead and set my basic bodice properly, getting it ready for my pattern making. So after placing your pattern in place, you can use your pin to hold it down, or you can use a paper gum like this to hold it down. So now my pattern pieces are in place. The next thing I'm going to do now, was to indicate where the shoulder line of both the front and back bodies meet. And then 3 inches above the bust line at the back bodice is where I started tracing my line up to this midpoint. And here, I've also traced out the back neck of the back bodice. You must have seen some patterns for this cape running all the way to the front bodice like so, straight forward like so, but that's not the way I'm going to do it, okay? Because fixing it over the shoulder is usually a very big job if you're going to do it that way. So I'm just going to show you how I usually make mine, so that it doesn't create too much work for me while putting my patterns together. So here, I'm simply going to measure from here, I marked at the back bodice, to the front here where I want my cape to stop, few inches above this point. That is 3 inches above the bust line. You can place yours anyhow you wish. So once you've measured this, you're going to remove 2 inches that you're going to take off from the shoulder while sewing, and then you mark 1 inch outside this area, away from the armhole line. Like you can see, I've indicated it already, and I'm going to make a connection line from this point to here. So I'm simply going to use my ruler to connect this line, creating the line for my cape. So now that this is done, as soon as you sew this shoulder to shoulder together like so, this cape is rightly going to fall on where it's supposed to be. So the next thing you're going to do now is to extend this line that separates the front and back bodies together, and you're going to mark an indication point here, and this point is going to serve like a purpose of flare, angle of a flare. So just as you put your tape on this angle, and you're going to mark the length of your cape, and you're going to put your tape there and take your tape all around to mark the same measurements all through your cape like so. So you're just going to take the measurement all around your cape, and I'm just going to show you how to modify this area of your cape very soon. So you take it all around, and when you're done doing that, you should have something like this. Okay, as you can see here, this was the indication I made earlier on, but here is the real part of my cape, which is 28 inches long from the shoulder line, and I've marked it all around. I'm just going to move this forward so that you see what I have here. As you can see, I've taken it up to this, and the next thing I'm going to do after I've made this line is to maneuver these matters by taking off whatever I removed here to this point, and then I'll make a smooth line to connect it all to each other. But first of all, I'm going to mark a connection line between here and there, and as you can see here, I've made a connection now, and as you can see, it's a parallel line. It's not really a straight line like so. So what I'm going to do here is to take off whatever I've removed here, and I've taken it over to the other side to balance this angle. And after doing that, I've created a smooth line connecting it back to my cape. So once I've kept my basic bodice aside, this is what it should look like, and I'm going to complete this tracing line. And when I am done, this is what it should look like after cutting it out. So the next thing for me to do is to slash off this zip allowance off. And this is my front bodice. I've retraced it on another paper, and I've created a space here because I want to modify it to an overlapping one. So now that I've done that already, I'm just going to measure down 7 inches from the neck shoulder line down, and again I'm going to measure out about 14 to 15 inches down. I'm going to measure out 14.5 inches like so. And the next thing I'm going to be doing here is to measure out to extend this line like so. And at this point of the waistline, I'm also going to extend this line out, and I'm going to mark like 4 inches out. That is 3.5 inches for the dart for the overlapping, and ½ inch for the sewing allowance. So from this point on, I'm going to make a connection from here up to the neckline. And once I've done that, the next thing I'm going to do is to connect these points together. So I'm just going to mark it like so. I'm going to mark 1.5 inch into my basic bodice. Okay, I'll mark 1.5 inch like so. Then I'm going to use my ruler to connect these points together. Then to eliminate gapping at this area, I'm just going to mark ½ inch in like so, and I'm going to make like a curved line into my pattern to create a sort of a shape for my front bodice. The next thing I did was to indicate the midpoint of the shoulder line, connect it to the dart line like so. Then the next thing I'm going to do now is to cut off this dart and open up this area like so, creating 2 pieces out of my front bodice. And while cutting, I'm going to add ½ inch to these areas for sewing allowance. So here I've cut out my main pieces, and I've placed it on my lining fabric, and I'm cutting it out as well. And for the front bodice, I've also cut these 2 pieces out, adding ½ inch for the seam allowance in between, then ½ inch at the bottom part of it also for taking in my hem. So here I'm just going to cut out my back bodice. As you can see, I've also added the hem allowance, and I've also removed the zip allowance from my cutting, and I cut this on fold. Then I have a sleeve pattern tutorial already on my channel, and I'll leave the link on the description box below. I've also cut out this cuff for my sleeve, so this is it. So here, now for the sewing part, I'm placing the cape pieces right side to right side together. I'm sewing from here on to the top part and all around the circumference of my cape, leaving these sides open. So when I'm done sewing it, it should look something like this, and I'm going to turn it inside out. And when I'm done with it, it should look something like this. And once I am done doing it, I'm simply going to go ahead and top stitch it. Then I'll sew these areas all together. So when I'm done doing that, the next thing I'm going to do now, as you can see, I've already stitched this area together, and it should look something like this. And when you're done doing it, you're going to go over to sewing the front pieces. So you paste all the front pieces together, and you're going to close these by sewing these two pieces together, and you're going to do so for the interface as well. So now that you're done that, you're going to place the interface on top of the main bodice and sew all around from the hemming part to the front side of it, leaving the sides open. So now that you're done doing this, you're going to notch this area and cut off all excesses. And once you're done doing that, you're going to turn it inside out. And when you do that, it should look something like this, and you should close these areas as well. Then you can top stitch if you wish. Then now you're done with the front pieces, it should look something like this, and you have an idea of what your front pieces should look like after sewing. So now onto the back stitch, I've placed my interface onto the right side of my back bodice, and I'm simply going to sew only the bottom part of it, like so. So when I'm done sewing it, I'm simply going to notch these areas, and I'm going to turn it inside out. And when I'm done with that, I've also stitched the lining onto the fabric like so. And the next thing I'm going to do is to sew the dart. Now I'm going to work on the dart, and after sewing the dart, the next thing I'm going to do now is to place the cape on top of the back piece. That is right side of the cape to the wrong side of my back piece, and I'm going to sew along the neckline. And after doing that, I'm going to notch these areas, and then I'll turn it inside out. And when I'm done with doing that, I'm going to join it from the shoulder part. As you can see, these are the right sides of my fabric, both the front and back. And I'm going to flip this over like so, keeping it right side to each other. And I'm going to open up the shoulder and this like so. And I'm going to put this in between both sides, both the cape and the back piece, and I'm going to wrap it all together like so. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to sew 1/2 inch on the neckline and 1 inch here at the armhole line. Then when I'm done doing that, it should look something like this. As you can see, I've joined the shoulders together like so. And the next thing I'm going to do now is to stitch together both the back piece and the cape piece like so. I'm going to stitch it from this point all along to there. So now that I'm done stitching this together, the next thing I'm going to do now is to sew on my cape to the front bodice by flipping it over like this, placing it properly where it should sit. Then I'm going to stitch from this point up to the front part. And when I'm done with that, you should have something like this, okay? And you're going to iron this out properly. Then the next thing for you to do now is to join it from the side seams. And once you're done doing that, you should have something like this. Actually, I like this result, but when I wore it, I didn't like how it stood up right here. So I'm just going to slash off 1 inch from the cape side and then sew it together. I'm just going to add the buttons as well. Let me show you how to modify this on your pattern, not to end up with the same mistake I did here. So at this point, you're going to mark in 1 inch and curve it like this so that it goes in like an armhole for your cape. So this is how to modify it on your cape. So for the sleeve, I sew on the seam allowance. Then what I did next was to open up this cuff. Then I'll place it like so. I'm sewing it along this side, and when I'm done, I slash off the excess fabric. Then I've turned my sleeve inside out, Then I'm going to fold this cuff into two, like so. Then when I'm done folding it into two, you should have something like this. And then I'm just going to close the mouth and stitch it onto my sleeves. Then I'm just going to go onto my armhole, and I'm going to slash off these excesses I removed from my cape and then add my sleeve. And once I'm done with that, my cape blazer is ready. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you like and subscribe to my channel. See you guys on my next tutorial. Bye.